Hello and welcome to MEPcast, a podcast for maternity education program of Clinical Skills Development Service. In each episode, we explore ideas and issues on how we can enhance and improve the delivery of maternity care education.
Today, I'm going to be discussing midwifery experiences with two of my midwifery colleagues, Doctors Without Borders, Médecins on Frontières. I'd like to welcome my guests today, Elisha Swift and Mandy Skene. They are both midwives who've been working as midwives in Australia and have branched out and are now working with MSF and have worked in several locations around the world. So thanks, guys, for joining me today. It's really exciting. Elisha kindly joined us on International Day of the Midwife in our panel discussion, and we talked briefly about her MSF experiences. And following that chat, there was quite a lot of discussion, I know, amongst the group. So I decided I thought it'd be good to get her back to do a podcast, and kindly Mandy's offered to join us as well, who's also been experiencing MSF work and is happy to discuss her experiences. So, yeah, great to have you here today. And I'm going to probably start with you, Elisha, because we didn't really finish off where we had our conversation before, really. Can you just tell me what your current role is with MSF? Because I know it's a little bit different than what you were doing previously.
Well, thanks, Sue, for having me here today. So my current role with MSF is the midwifery advisor for the Operational Centre of Paris. I'm a technical advisor for the operations and the fields. So if anyone has a question that they can shoot off an email and I can send resources back, and also with operations, we can sit and discuss and plan the future of projects.
Okay, so are you based here in Australia currently?
I am. It's going to sound a little bit strange, but I'm based from Brisbane to Sydney to Paris.
Okay. I know you've been providing, you joined that role, I think, just before COVID or during COVID. When did that happen?
It was really on that cusp when we were discovering what COVID was, so from August last year.
Okay. And I know you've been providing some training for staff during that time. So during that COVID period, what's been those challenges for you? Because I think normally those things are done in-house, aren't they, with your teams?
Absolutely. So obviously, COVID provides a lot of unique challenges, but especially for training, we are having to adapt fast to be able to provide training for the field. So before COVID, we were able to go face-to-face and be in the field and be with the teams, or also pull people together and bring them into cities, and we could provide face-to-face trainings and workshops that would last maybe 2 weeks. So what we're doing now is trying to transition onto an online forum. And in fact, tonight at 8:30 to 1 a.m, we are providing a workshop online. It's our first one. It's called an AVA workshop, where we have 16 participants from around the world, which at the moment includes us in Australia, Canada, and Nigeria, and Iran, and we're going to work together and work through this workshop tonight. So that's one avenue of training. Another one that you're helping me work on is what we call the hybrid also. So it's all about that simulation. So we're trying to create a package that we can provide to the field that they can take and adapt their contexts, and also provide that hands-on clinical training and drills and skills.
So your main role obviously sounds like it's training staff. Is that correct?
It's definitely a component. The other part will be mentorship of midwives within the field. Also focused a lot on a position called a mobile implementing officer. So we have a team of midwives who are going to be part of this position, and they will be, at the moment, because of COVID, definitely our hands and eyes in the field. So at the moment we have one midwife in the MIO position. She's in Mali. She'll be going to Niger and also Nigeria. And then the other midwife will be Pauline. She'll be going into DRC, so the Congo, for 4 months. And then we're also working on Palestine and Pakistan and Malawi.
Wow, a real repertoire.
Yeah.
So once, and hopefully once COVID, we won't get rid of it altogether, but once we're able to travel, will your job take you to some of these places, or will you remain? Where will you be working?
So working on that myself now, because it's easy typically to leave Australia, but it's a little bit hard to get back in. So wanted to maximise my time overseas when I do get to go. So the countries I'm focusing on at the moment are Afghanistan, Chad, and maybe Iran, also maybe South Sudan.
Excellent. Sounds really exciting. So what are MSF's expectations regarding their staff for their training before they go out on the field?
It's a little bit difficult to describe, I think, because when we really invest in midwives after that first mission. So we have videos and online courses that we provide first missioners, but as soon as you've got through your first one and you feel comfortable and confident and you've got that burning itch to continue at MSF, we really do invest in you then as well. So yeah, I guess maybe Mandy, you could also share, because you've come out of a field as well, maybe.
Yeah, I think that was my question to you, really, was you've experienced that. How long ago was it you did your training? It's probably well over a year ago now.
So it's actually so interesting listening to all of this, because it's all so structured now, but I feel like Elisha has been these mentors and trainers for me, like off the cuff a lot of the time when I've gone. But for me, when I first went, we do like the pre-departure training, which is a lot around that's not just for midwives, that's anyone that goes. So we did like the overnight orienteering, where they kind of put you in the parklands and you need to navigate around the parklands in the middle of the night. And then you also learn about like conflict and dealing with that kind of insecurity and things like that. So there's kind of a general sense what MSF offer you. For me, I was actually really lucky in my first mission to do some of the invested training for midwives. I had originally been... they were originally going to send me for like sexual violence training, and then it just didn't happen in the end. And I actually got sent on the advanced obstetrics training that also like the low resource. It was kind of an MSF focused one, which I was really lucky to go on. And it was really helpful for me because it gave me skills in being resourceful whilst also adapting those advanced life support for obstetrics skills. A lot of the stuff that I kind of experienced that weren't for low resources, we had probably come across in our trainings in Australia as well, with like prompt and kind of the ones that we do here. But then it's just more specific. It gives you that kind of that low resource setting, how to make baccaries out of like condoms and little, devices and things like that you've got in the field. So yeah, I was really lucky to have done that on my first mission. I knew that I wasn't typically like going to do that, and it just happened for me, which was really nice.
So would you say that prepared you well for what you were faced with once you got there?
Well, I did it halfway through. So I did the pre-departure before I went. I actually did mine in Germany and then went straight to field, where sometimes people might do it a little bit before. It's always different to line up with the timing of when the training exists. For me, it was over in Germany, so that's a big aspect of MSF. I find all their training and what Elisha was alluding to, that face-to-face stuff and bringing people together is normally in countries all over the world. So you meet other like-minded people doing the exact same kind of work as you. It's really rewarding in that sense, and I think COVID has definitely changed that a lot for our training. Even on my last mission just recently, like no one was doing training really, which it's like you're still there with people who know what they're doing, but it does change the dynamic a little bit, I think. Yeah, so I did that, and then this mission I haven't really done too much. It was an emergency mission, this one, so a lot of my resources came from contacting reference, contacting Elisha, trying my best to kind of get those people that I can talk to and refer to cases for, because sometimes you do feel a little bit isolated in managing those cases. Even though you do have a great team around you, a lot of the time they may not have any obstetric background or experience, or they've only got it from their missions. So it's nice to have a reference that you can speak to. So
are you often the only midwife, say, in a team, or are there more of you? What's sort of the ratios normally like?
Yeah, so...
What's been your experience?
For me, I've only done 2 missions, and they've both been very, very different. But in both missions, there has not been a maternity team until I have got there, and then that's part of my job, was to recruit and build a maternity team. So that's, myself. You go over as a midwife manager, and then recruiting midwives, and then in some contexts, capacity building those midwives up into a supervisor position. And then they really become like your family.
So they're local people you're building into your team?
Yeah. So my last mission was a mix of Sudanese and Ethiopian midwives working as a team together. So that obviously gives some complexity to language, even down to things like the calendars being different. Like it's just, you have a really dynamic team, different levels of experience. Some midwives are community-based, they've learnt in the village, more like a traditional birth attendant. And then you've got the others that have been to like university education trained. So, it's a really diverse team.
That's going to be, I would imagine that's pretty difficult to know where to start with people when you've got such a mixed group of people, but you have to start somewhere. And the good thing is you come together as a team, and that's a starting point, basically.
Yeah. And doing actually, in my first mission, by the end, I was there for a little while, but by the end we did a big training day, which I kind of adapted from training that we've done back home, and also using the skills from the also training to do our own training session in the field. And that's kind of the idea that MSF will invest in you to do this training all over the world, and then you can take that to the field and teach the others that skill as well. But it's also a great opportunity to see the different levels of skill that you're dealing with or working with.
Excellent. A question I've been wanting to ask both of you, actually, and you can both answer this question, as I've spoken to Elisha about this before. What were some of the most difficult things you encountered on some of those first missions that you did for MSF? I might go back to Elisha, actually.
I think for me, the biggest difficulty I faced was coming back to remembering what I know about midwifery and trusting my skills and trusting my knowledge, because you do feel like you're thrown in the deep end. You're going, my first mission was to Iraq. So, all the connotations that you have around Iraq and what's going on, floating around your head, you didn't know what you were going to be thrown into. You didn't know where you're going to be living, what the city looks like. So those cultural shock, I guess you could say, when you first get there. And once you are able to shed that, you get there and you realise you have all this knowledge and you have all this skill as a midwife, and that's where your comfort comes from and your support and your confidence. And then all of a sudden you forget that you don't have a CTG, and you forget that you don't have an emergency bell on the wall, and that becomes your norm. So I feel like for myself, the shock wore off pretty fast, because you're just like, well, I'm here and I'm going to go forward. And the team that you have around, like you say, the midwives, even though they have different levels of experiences, or you might have a different type of team, are there obstetricians, are there doctors, are there medical team leaders you can call on, but everyone's there for the same purpose. They want to support their community. They want to make sure their women are birthing safely. So everyone has that focus, and that just gives you strength.
So it sounds like some of your very basic skills as a midwife was something you had to draw on greatly in these situations. Am I right in thinking
Absolutely. And I think sometimes when you're in a lovely big tertiary hospital, you kind of skip across the basics because you have to delve so fast into the complexities. And when you don't have all the diagnostic opportunities, people don't come for as much antenatal care either. So you're really having to think on your feet when you meet a mum for a first time. So you have to make sure that you've got, you forget how important your fingertips are, when you're palping that lovely pregnant abdomen and discovering, well, is this baby breech or not? You've really got to get down to basics.
Yeah, and I think just before we started the podcast, we were talking about spending time with women and how if you spend time with them, you recognise changes in women, which I think you're right, in the big centres where we have, great uses of epidurals and pain relief, we don't tend to see those subtle changes. And I think Mandy was talking about being with a student, I think, the other day, and how that's important. Do you think your work with MSF has helped you improve those clinical skills?
Totally. I think that it gave me back the ability to, like Elisha said, trust my own skill and to trust our team, because it's so important when you're trying to make these big decisions, when you've got such limited resources, and like even including transport, you might have one car that's only available for 4 days. Like, you have to trust either yourself, if you're the one performing the skill, or your team if you're out of the field, that what they have felt and what they understand is going on using their own midwifery tools, their hands, is a decision maker to transport that person with the only car you've got for 4 days. So it's really trusting each other and trusting our hands. I think in my last mission I was constantly saying, we don't have that. We don't have that. You want Cinto? We don't have that. You're going to have to do fundal rub. You're going to have to use your hands. You're going to have to breastfeed. Like, that is what you're going to have to use. And we would always joking, like, we have the best midwifery tools we've got, and like using our hands as like a that's all we've got right now, so let's use them.
I think you're taking me back, and not that this is an example of what you've been through, but I certainly, when I worked in the UK, I went to a midwife-led unit, which was away from the main unit, and we didn't have CTGs and we didn't have epidurals, and I remember thinking, my goodness, can I do this? And I had 9 years in that unit, and I learned how to be a midwife there. Certainly, how to spend time with women and how to use my skills. And I hope that people don't lose that. And I think it's really great that you two are definitely using those skills and teaching the local midwives to do that as well, because that's the fundamentals of the building blocks, isn't it? What's been some of the best things, would you say, about working for MSF? And I'm going to go back to you, Mandy, for that one. Can you think about anything that's been really exciting?
I think I've kind of already touched on it, but for me, it's the staff or the colleagues I work with, because they become your family for sure. You're in these like remote settings, and for me, even last time, like I actually had completely no communication with my family back home. And they are your family. And I learned so much, not only just the other expats, because obviously you're kind of living with them in the compound, but for me also the midwives. They teach you so much. Like the crazy stuff they do that it's like their second nature to do. I learned so much from them every single time. And I think one of the biggest things for me that I learn is humility. Like they just they come to work every day, ready to work. Like in my last mission, they were coming in from a refugee camp. You know, they have almost nothing there, coming to work every single day, working super hard, willing to stay behind. I would be like, no, your shift is over. You can go home. I'll stay here. And they would be like, no, I'm staying. If the woman hasn't delivered, I'm staying. So like I just learned so much from them, their skills, their commitment to what they're doing, them wanting to help and like look after their family and friends and all their community as well. That's the biggest thing for me.
When you say remote, what's around you in some of these places? Very much or nothing?
Not even a tree.
Literally not a tree. Last time was a desert, and so it's just a refugee camp, so it's just tents everywhere basically on a desert. My mission before that was more tropical, so there's lots of trees around, fallen trees a lot of the time, but it is just a dead space that they've turned into it might have a rundown kind of primary health centre looking building, and MSF usually do a lot of logistics and recon of those buildings to make them into a setting where we can work out of.
So you mentioned you were living in a compound. So are you living in that camp, or are you living separately? How does that work?
Yeah, so last time I was in the camp, but so MSF will have like a gate around the health facility, and on that particular occasion we were living inside the health facility, just at the back in tents. Other times you'll be in a separate compound but close by, or not close by. Sometimes you travel for 4 hours from your compound to the site. So it just varies, I think, depending on where you are.
So just for the listeners, where have you actually been with MSF so far?
My first mission was, I started 2018. I went to South Sudan. I was in the field for 6 months, away for 8, which kind of included a lot of training either side and in between. And then this time was an emergency mission, so it was shorter. It was only 4 months, and I was in Sudan on the border of Ethiopia.
Fantastic. And Elisha, where have you been with MSF?
So I've been to Iraq 3 times, but in 3 different projects. So the first was in a project called Dermiz, the second was in Ninawa, and the third was in Mosul. And then in between those 3 missions, I went to Tanzania and also South Sudan.
That's amazing, absolutely amazing. So when you go on these missions, I would imagine it varies from place to place. Are you well-resourced or not? Or is it just variable from one camp to another?
I think I don't think for MSF that we do try to be really well-resourced within our project. So like Mandy said, in emergency situations, you're still making lots of assessments. You're going through all your checklists. But because of the hard work that the emergency teams do, the orders get made and those orders get sent to Bordeaux in France, where we have an enormous warehouse and it's everything that you could possibly need to start a project. So the reason why MSF does that is all about quality assurance, because we want to make sure that if we're going to be providing medical care, that it's at the highest standard we can give. So everything gets ordered and shipped and put in country. So even though we don't have resources such as CTGs, we still have Dopplers and Pinards. We have little ultrasounds. So we have everything. We have sterilisation equipment. So everything that you need to start a hospital effectively is there, and it does get shipped. Sometimes we will do things locally, so a local purchase. But again, we want to make sure that quality is strong because we don't want to not provide quality care.
So you mentioned oxytocin or syntocinon. So what drugs do you have?
That's abnormal. We normally do have oxytocin.
So that situation was unusual.
This was just because I think COVID has played a big role in this though. Like actually receiving those shipments has been difficult. So yeah, that wouldn't be a normal. We normally have oxytocin. At least misoprostol, that's always there.
Yeah, but we always have your syntocinon, your ergometrin and misoprostol. We're now getting the tranexamic acid, so that's also available to help manage those emergency situations. But so we have those robust.
So you've got some relatively good resources, but that you just don't have an endless supply. I think we don't realise in our clinical environments working in big facilities how lucky we are with all the stuff that we've got. But I think sometimes too much can be too much, and we don't really appreciate it. Certainly the cost of things is huge, isn't it? It's absolutely huge. Mandy, you've come, and both Elisha have come from a large Queensland Health facility here at the Royal Brisbane, and in these low resource places, have you had to adjust your way of thinking of how you do use equipment, or when you're teaching people? How have you adjusted to do that?
Yes. I think it goes both ways. So definitely in the field, I always have a lab training, so it's just, adjusting that kind of mindset on, teaching people to use fundal rub and breastfeeding instead of relying on that medication. Like you said, the supply is not always abundant. So 1 week you might have that, and then next week they have to use their kind of primal skills a little bit more. So that's definitely like influenced the way we do things. I think the low resource training, like the also training, kind of teaches you to use things that might just be a little bit more readily available as well. So that's kind of incorporated into your training. But then in reverse, I think that it teaches me here how to look after women without relying on that stuff so much. It's great that we have these red buttons on the wall where we can press and people come. But I struggle when, say, for instance, like a baby needs resuscitation. I try as a team leader or clinical support to just give the midwife space to ventilate that baby first and do the primary skills on that resus before a paediatrician takes over. So the ped can be there, but let's give that midwife a bit of training. You're standing right next to her, so let her do that. You can watch for quality, but just kind of allowing people to have that skill a little bit more.
That's very useful. Yeah, sorry, Elisha, you can say something.
We do have on our big medical standard list training equipment, so you can order your simulations. So we have the Mama Natalie's and baby.
They were great.
Was it Mama Mia? I was going to say Mamma Mia, but I think that's right.
No, it's Natalie. It's
Mama Natalie. You're right.
Mama Natalie, yeah.
Mamma Mia would be good.
And the bleeding uterus.
And we have like the arms and things like that. So when you want to learn how to use put in implants, or we also have the little pelvises to help manage learning how to put an IUD in. But otherwise, what we can do sometimes is you get like a few baby bottles and you cut off the teats and you make things
or the papaya.
The papaya. Exactly.
We did the papaya for Elisha taught me actually how to do a manual vacuum aspiration, and then for training we used a papaya to like suction out the seeds out of
It's called improvise, overcome and adapt, I think. And when you're faced with situations where you are under low resources, it's amazing how easily you can think of using things in a lateral way. And I do think in big facilities we just quickly open packs but don't actually think to actually need that pack half the time. So that's really interesting. How you've talked a bit about the teams and the fact that you are often maybe the only midwife and you establish a team which are your locals. So how does MSF actually structure their teams with all the different clinicians? How does that actually work? I might throw that to you, Elisha, because you may have a little bit more knowledge around that one.
Answer that better.
Yeah,
the pressure's on.
Sorry.
So I guess if I'll describe it in the sense of when a project starts, we have a team and coordination, and then from coordination you have your project. So coordination's usually in the capital of the country. And then say, for example, a country like South Sudan, you might have 2 or 3 projects. So in your coordination, you have your medical coordinators, your logistic coordinators, your supply coordinators, your human resources coordinators. And then as you tease out into the field, you have the same positions, but field-based. So in a field project, you'll have your project coordinator and under them your team leaders. So your medical team leader, supply team leader, human resources team leader, and logistics team leader. And then under those leaders, that's where you are filled out with all those brilliant and unsung heroes of the national teams. So I can only talk about a midwifery team. So when you have a midwifery team, you'll have a position called a Midwifery Activity Manager, who typically is an expatriate. And then underneath that expatriate, you'll have a midwifery supervisor, which can also be an expatriate or a national midwife. It might be an expatriate because those midwifery supervisor positions are like the training grounds, that mentorship for you as an expatriate to become a midwifery activity manager. And then under those two midwives is your national team. And the national team can be filled up with midwives, nurses and midwife assistants, or nursing aides, or traditional birth attendants. We have an acronym for the team in Pakistan, LHV, but they all have their little tweaks. So it's really robust and comprehensive. And then on the side of your midwifery team, we have your paediatric team as well, obviously. And then we're also working with our community health promoters and our health promotion messages, and then also mental health.
Interesting. Mandy, you mentioned something about the little red button that we press for emergencies. Can you just let the listeners know, what do you do if you have an emergency situation? How do you summons help?
Use your other skill, which is your mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, normally as the midwifery activity manager, one of the big things I thought I was going over there to do the first time was to deliver babies. That's not what you do. And so a lot of the time I was there to come for the emergencies rather than doing the day-to-day deliveries. They would call out to me if there was an emergency going on or like something wasn't going well. So a lot of the time that is just someone coming and getting you, or you being close by that you can go and check. That's kind of I
also think it's about the motto of being prepared. So when you also can recognize what's normal, so you can quickly see what's abnormal. And that's when we talk about all the training that we've talked about, like the also and your SRH trainings, identifying normal labour. Yeah. And then as soon as you go, I think that's abnormal, and you prepare. So like you say, Mandy, they might go, hey, I think this is happening. Are you around? So you start to move in a bit closer, and you're just available for the team to predict an emergency, I guess.
And obviously in a maternity setting, women don't labour during the day, do they? So what do people do at night? What do you do at night time, for example? Are you on call, or how does that work?
Yeah. So I think about the last mission that I was just on call. So it is a tiring job sometimes, especially in those emergency settings where your team is pretty small. I think I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 4 months. And I think actually I had 1 day off. And yes, women only labour at nighttime, it feels like sometimes. But you're on call. So you've got a phone usually that they can call, or you just know what's going on. So you'll tend to just get yourself up and go check on things. And actually, as you're kind of saying that kind of preparedness, I can remember a story in South Sudan where we had a grand multi, and things were just going a bit too slow for a grand multi. And I was actually in the facility still, but off doing training with some other staff. And one of the midwives came and told me that, it'd been going for 6 hours now. And then so we just ended up being a shoulder to toe share for that lady. Yeah. But there's nothing, like we couldn't refer her at that stage because for us, transport was really difficult in that project specifically. And so managing that in the field is it's a new skill that you have to adapt to. And really, like I can't say more about the team, because your team really is what helps you the most. Like we had staff there ready to resus the baby. Then there was me and the midwives dealing with the mum. Like there's just everyone comes. Like all the doctors, all the nurses, everyone comes because they want to help and they want to do whatever they can.
So typically at a birth, do you usually have 2 people when the baby's been born, or does the midwife manage that on her own unless there's a problem?
It just depends on the team. So Again, when our team was a bit small last time, a nurse would be the second, or there would normally be a nurse in the inpatient area and a midwife in the maternity. So the nurse would come and help, or whoever's really available. Sometimes there was doctors there, or if one of the other expats were awake already, they would be there. But it's not always necessary to have two if you don't have a second person. But it is helpful, of course, to have that second person around.
But also most delivery rooms, it's one room for everybody. So
how many people are we talking about, everybody here?
Yeah, so the biggest project that I've had, there was 4 to 5 rooms, so you could have 4 to 5 labouring women at once. So you can't see everybody because privacy is ensured, but you can hear everybody. So you might not be that one-to-one care, but you've got the flexibility and movement because you haven't got walls imposing on you.
That must have been interesting when you first started, having come from a place where women do labour in separate rooms. That must have been interesting in the beginning, was it?
It was so funny for me because definitely in my second project, the way the room had been set up was the birthing beds were on the back wall, but the door opened the way that when you went through the door, you saw the women, like you saw the soles of their feet, if I'm polite. And I couldn't work it out because every time a woman would come in, because that project just blew out, so we didn't have enough space. So women would be delivering and other women would be coming in fully dilated going, I need a bed. But I'd look at them and go, how come you're in here? Like I didn't, because I'm like, this woman's birthing and she's got no privacy. And all I had to do was put the beds on the other wall.
Yeah.
To ensure more privacy. And it was just a concept that I couldn't quite get until it just clicked.
It's so interesting, that whole environmental thing that I think we take for granted. But I think also we were also discussing before we started the podcast about how much technology has changed in the maternity space and how overwhelming all the pieces of equipment are for women coming into our own labouring environments. And I do think it's time for us to actually take a step back and look at what we're doing again, because we don't realise how important that is. And that's very basic, even to these more technical situations that we're faced with on a day-to-day basis. So that's interesting. I'm going to change tack a little bit here because I know that MSF is a French organisation, and I think you've been learning to speak French, haven't you, Elisha?
Oui.
Yeah. So when you're in, and I think they've actually asked you because obviously you're in an MSF position, and you're, I think, going to go to Paris fairly soon. Is that correct?
I am. So hopefully in August I will get to go to Nice and immerse myself in the French language for 4 weeks, and je prends, bien sûr, mais lentement. C'est très difficile en language.
So can you please tell us what that was in English?
Translate, please.
I'm learning, but it's so slowly, and it's a difficult language, obviously, and especially as an adult learner.
Yeah.
So you're very supported with MSF and your language. So when you start to move into different positions, or if you have an extended career in the field and you want to start branching out into those French-speaking missions, you're supported 100% to do that. But when you're in the field, like Mandy was saying, you've got an Ethiopian team and a South Sudanese team, so they've got different dialects and different base languages, and there's just so much out there. And you're so impressed because all these people speak so many languages, and you speak one, maybe not so well. But when you're in the field, not necessarily in the French-speaking missions, but if you're in an Arabic-speaking mission or an English-speaking mission, see, I can't speak, you have a translator. And they become your shadow. I was just going to ask you what happens if you're not speaking English and you have, like Mandy said, so many different languages in a team. That must become challenging. But I agree with you. We are very lazy. English-speaking countries are very lazy, to our detriment, I think, because 100%.
They can speak other languages and we can only speak one. I agree with you. So you have translators. You don't have multilinguistic staff members, or do you?
A bit of both.
Yes.
So I can think of a situation where we had a very severe obstetric complication, and when you're in a situation like that, you use your first language. And the translator, her name was Noor, and she was just absolutely brilliant. And without her, she ended up being that, when we talk about emergency and they have that lovely line and someone stands and watches the helicopter, our translator was doing that because she could hear everything that was going on, to the point of the team, when we reflected, were like, you just stood out, Noor, just because of your language skills. And she was able to direct and get things. What was your question again?
I was talking about multilinguistic staff members, actually.
Yes,
yeah. And you said translators
the midwives,
are amazing.
once they start to get a little bit of English, they love speaking with you in English as well, and they want you to speak with them and really support you with that effort. And I will do anything for anyone if they're happy to speak.
So it's
to me
not
English.
it's not MSF's expectation that you learn to speak French, but they would prefer that, I would imagine.
If you're going to go to your French missions,
Yes.
it's going to be
Okay.
very difficult for you not to be able to speak French, because you probably won't get a translator for that mission.
Yeah.
But with the Arabic typical missions, they will give you have a translator for you.
Elisha, do you find as well, like your body language?
Oh, you pick up. It's amazing. So I remember being in Tanzania and the team were having a meeting, and I was the only English speaker there. So I said, please have the meeting in Swahili or French or whatever you want to have the meeting in. And I sat there with Daniel, who was my translator, and I was like, are they talking about this now? Yes. Are they talking about this now? Yes. I'm like, I got this.
It's so, I was the same. It happened with me as well. Like you would just, I would do the exact same thing as you. If we were having a meeting, I would just say, like, you guys speak in your language, and I've got my translator, so she'll tell me. And a lot of the time I would kind of pick up on what they were talking about anyway. Or there was this lovely Sudanese midwife I was working with who didn't speak one bit of English, whereas a lot of the others, they spoke a little bit of English. But she would just kind of throw things at me, nicely, throwing things at me, or like do something with her hands that I would be like, oh, okay, I know what she's talking about. She's going to do the placenta now. Right, that makes sense.
I think all midwives, because we've all dealt with women who are non-English speaking, and I think you can look after a labouring woman and deliver a baby without having to speak English, very much by body language, hand expressions, facial expressions. It's quite challenging, but you can do it. It's not easy. It's a difficult thing to do.
Well, actually, I feel like I came back from my mission, and with all the women that were on the board, I think I could say hello to all of them in their language.
That's so good.
That's great. That's really great.
I had an Arabic lady the other day that I spoke a teeny tiny bit of Arabic to, and I was like, yeah.
I'm very aware of how long we've been talking. I just really want to do one more question really before we sort of wrap this up. I think for the midwives or even nurses who might be listening to this, if you're thinking about applying for MSF, this can be either Elisha or Manny or both of you, what sort of experience would you suggest they get before they think about joining MSF?
I think the first thing you should look at doing is reflect back on why you became a midwife. I think that's really important to have those principles and those values really concrete. Then what I'd really recommend from there is definitely have 2 to 3 years experience as a midwife, and then if not, even have time in a rural setting. Really go out and get your skills honed and build your confidence, build your trust, because that will just pay off on so many levels in your mission.
I think the same as understanding why. I think the why is a big question. Like why, you're a midwife, and then also why you want to. I think that they're the 2 big things, but also for me, I feel like even more experience is needed, especially that for me, particularly, I waited until I had a bit of that kind of leadership. You really do need some good leadership and communication skills. So I think if you can find your path in your career wherever you live, and yes, remote or rural work would definitely benefit you, but if you can find some leadership skills somehow, whether that's moving up into kind of a leadership position in your workplace or doing your own self-training on that kind of stuff, I think that would make a big difference to your mission.
That's great. I'm just going to do a little bit of a recap of our discussion today, and then I'll have just a couple of other things to ask you before we wrap this up. So, how you can work for MSF, we've just discussed that. What MSF training pathways are before you go on a tour, so people know that they're well supported. What ongoing education and training is available. Some examples of experiences of working overseas with MSF, which you have talked about that, and it sounds really, I would love to do it. I think I need to turn the clock back a bit now, though. What experience is advantageous before working for MSF, and what are some of the highs and lows of working on these tours? And it sounds like to me that most of them are pretty good. I'm sure there are some challenges on a day-to-day basis. For our listeners, any good websites or readings or things you can suggest for them to look at if they're thinking about going down this path?
I think this isn't just because I'm doing this with you, Sue, but the MEP training I think is a great tool. The videos and everything that are part of that, or even coming to the face-to-face training, I think, for me, the also training as well, which maybe Elisha can touch on that kind of stuff as well, but that gives you the skills to understand emergencies in contexts where it might not be so comfortable for you right now.
Thank you.
Obviously, the MSF website. There's lots of testimonials on there. There's lots of resources and videos that you can watch, but also all the other networks. So your WHO network, and there's an IBDP network that have a lot of forums where people can discuss what's going on in the field and how we can keep moving forward.
Great. Well, I'd just like to say a big thank you again for coming in today and having this discussion. And I'm sure it's going to probably get a few questions from this. I'd probably like to invite you back again to maybe talk about some of the cases that you might have managed in the past, which may be something we think about for Series 2 of our podcasts. So thank you both for coming.
Thanks, Sue.